This is Advanced Math 11.7 homework questions. That's the review worksheet number 2 that I posted online or you picked up from the main office. I'm going to do these questions here. This is the worksheet here. The answers are on the back there. And I am going to start now. Okay, so these are the ones I'm going to do. I'm going to do all of one, at least talk about every piece. There's A through D, so I'm going to start off with 1A, which is the vertex is 2, 5. It opens left, and a point on the parabola is -2, 1. And what they're asking you to do in this section is write the equation for each conic in standard form, sketch the graph, and identify all its characteristics. Remember, a conic is one of those 4 shapes: the circle, parabola, ellipse, or hyperbola. Those 4 shapes are conics. So when it says write the equation for each conic, I'm referring to any of those 4 shapes. Okay, sketch the graph. Now it says standard form, and all of them are standard form. Now the textbook standard form and what I wrote in my notes for standard form are different. And not only that, for the parabolas, I want you to write them in vertex form. So that's just a heads up from now on, like on the quiz, and I will talk about that when I go over quiz problems. If it ever talks about a parabola and it says write it in standard form, I want you to write it in vertex form. That's how it's going to be on the test, on the final, and so forth. Okay, so I am just going to plot it 2, 5. The point on the parabola is -2, 1, and it says it's opening left, which goes like this. And it tells us, we know it's opening left even without them telling us because of that point on the parabola. But we also need to know, so we know whether it's y equals x squared or x equals y squared. If it's sideways, it's going to be x equals y squared. So x equals a parentheses y minus k quantity squared plus h. That was the vertex form that was written in notes. Okay, x equals a y minus 5 squared plus 2. Opposite of the inside, outside stays the same. Y goes with y. This goes with the x. Excuse me. Okay, so what else? I need to find A, and I'm going to find A by plugging the point in. Remember, when you're plugging a point in, you don't have to worry about the negative. It will work out on its own. So I'm just going to plug it in and do the work. All right, so you're going to subtract the 2, divide the 16, you'll get A equals -1/4. So your equation is x equals A, which is -1/4, parentheses y minus 5 quantity squared plus 2. And that is your vertex form for this parabola. If you check your answer in the back, I'm not sure if the answers in the back of which form they used. Yes, they did use vertex form. So it's right here. All right, the next thing they ask us to do on this worksheet is find all the characteristics. So for parabola, those characteristics would be the vertex, the focus, the line of symmetry or axis of symmetry, and the directrix. On the test, these will be given to you. You don't have to figure out what is it for a parabola if they need me to find. It'll give you this blank, that blank, 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 and you fill them in. Okay, vertex is there, opposite of the inside, outside stays the same. 5, 2, but the 2 comes first because the 5 goes with the y, and we know that because that was given. The foci, we do C equals 1/4 times the absolute value of A. Absolute value of A is 1/4, which equals 1/1. So my C value is 1. I'm going to go right 1 for my directrix because it's outside, and left 1 for my focus because it's always on the inside. So the focus is 1, 5. And the directrix over here, that's an x equals line, and it's x equals 3. And the line of symmetry is here. That's a y equals line, and that's y equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Y equals 5. So there are the characteristics, and it did ask us to sketch. So there's the sketch, the characteristics, and it's written in vertex form. All right, so that's everything for 1A. Okay, next one is 1B. And the given information for 1B is -5, 1, and 1, -7. And what else does it say? The endpoints of the diameter. These are endpoints of your diameter. All right, I'm going to sketch it. Okay, these are the endpoints of my diameter. What I don't know is, like, I can find it, but I can't just count inwards, like, you know, because it's at an angle like this. But we can use the midpoint formula, and we've talked about that before. You add your x's, and we're doing that to find the center. The center, use the midpoint formula. And you end up with -2, -3. All right, so that is your center. Okay, so -2, 1, 2, 3. And then what we're going to do is find the radius. The radius is the length from your center to any endpoint, and we know that's an endpoint. It doesn't matter which endpoint you use as long as it's to the endpoint of your circle. Okay, I'm just going to use this point since that's the one I marked, and that point is 1, -7, and this point here is -2, -3. So I am going to use the distance formula because that's going to be my radius. So the radius equals the distance formula, which is the square root of quantity squared plus quantity squared. Subtract the x's in here, subtract the y's in here. So -2 minus 1. And y minus y would be -3 minus -7. So that gives me -3 squared plus, change the opposite, is that 4 squared? So that gives me 9 plus 16. So the radius equals the square root of 25. So r equals 5. So the radius is 5. All right, those are my characteristics. They do want me to graph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And come around, make your circle. Yeah. That doesn't look very circle-ish, but you get the point. Okay, and there is our circle. Center is -2, -3, and the radius is 5. The equation. X minus -2, so x plus 2, quantity squared, plus y minus -3, so y plus 3, quantity squared, equals r squared, so that's 25. There's the equation of your circle. All right, 1C gives us the foci plus or minus 3, 2. The length of the major axis is 10, and that is all the information given. Okay, so let's go ahead and sketch the given information. Okay, so I go right 3, up 2, left 3, up 2, and those are my foci, so I'm going to go ahead and put stars there. and the length of the major axis is 10. Now, major axis, minor axis is only given and labeled when it is an ellipse. So this is going to be an ellipse. And the ellipse is the one that runs on the major axis. So the major axis runs in the same direction as the foci. So because the foci always runs in the same direction as the major axis. So if the foci are right and left, that must mean that the major axis is right and left. So I'm going to go right 5 and left 5 from the center. What is the center? The center is 0, 2. You can tell that from the image. You can tell that by using the midpoint formula. All in all, the center is 0, 2. So from the center, I'm going to go right 5 and left 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for my endpoints. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those there, I don't know how far up and down I'm going yet, but I know I'm going to be going right and left 5 from the center. Because it's right and left 5, that is my x value, so that's my A. And by x value, I mean the number that goes underneath the x, because it's right and left. A is 5. And C is A is the length from the center to your endpoint, if I'm going right and left. C is the value from your center to your star, and that C value is 3. So I know A is 5, I know C is 3, and I'm going to start to write the equation. Okay, x squared always comes first on these, and it's x minus 0, so just x squared, plus y minus 2 quantity squared over equals 1. I know A is 5, 5 squared is 25, and that goes with the x. This is going to be my b squared. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to find it. Since I have A and C, I can use my formula. My C squared equals absolute value of A squared minus B squared. And I know it's minus because it's the opposite of this sign here all the time. Now I'm just going to do big minus small, so I don't have to worry about the absolute value. C squared equals, I know that A1 is bigger. And how do I know that? Because it's on my major axis. So it's going to be 5 squared minus b squared. And I know the c squared already. C is 3. So I have 9 minus 25 equals negative b squared. B squared equals 16. So right there, I'm ready to plug it in over here. This is 16, which means this is my equation. All right, they are asking us to sketch it and find all the bits and pieces, so I'm going to do that now. Center, opposite, 0, 2, and we knew that earlier. The foci are those endpoints there, which are negative 5, 0 and positive 5, 0. I'm sorry, negative 5, 2 and positive 5, 2. You can write it like this, plus or minus 5, 2, or two separate points. Negative 5, 2, positive 5, 2. It's up to you. Just know in a multiple choice test, they could be written one of those two ways. Okay, the length of the major axis, they gave it to us, it's 10. The length of the minor axis, well, I went right and left 5. That's what gave me the 10. I'm going to go up and down 4 from the center. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there is my shape. Now if I went up and down 4, that's a total length of 8. So the length of my minor axis is 8, and the eccentricity, remember, is your C value over the A or B, depending on which one's bigger. C is 3 over, which one's bigger, that one there, so it's C over 5, because it's C over A or B, not A squared or B squared. Divide that, you get 0.6. All right, there's your graph, there's your equation, and there are all the important pieces of information. Okay, moving right along. 1D. Gives you the vertices are 2, 4 and 2, negative 2. And the foci are 2, 7 and 2, negative 5. Okay, so I'm going to graph and figure out what the shape is and then find all the pieces. All right, 2, 4, 2, negative 2, and that's enough right there to find the center. 2 plus 2 divide by 2, 4 plus negative 2 divide by 2, that gives you 2 comma 1. That's your center. And your foci are 2, 7, and put a star, and 2, negative 5. Excuse me. Fix that one just a smidge bit. Okay. All right, you could also use the midpoint formula on those if you did on the stars instead of the dots. If you did your midpoint there, you're still going to end up with 2, 1 as your center. Okay. That's enough information to at least get started. We know it's opening up and down. I don't know how wide or narrow yet because I don't have my asymptotes in, but I know for sure it's opening up and down because the stars are always inside the cups of the hyperbola. And I know it's a hyperbola. That's another thing I know, because if it were an ellipse, the stars would be on the inside of the vertices, not the outside. Okay, so I know it's a hyperbola. I know it's opening up and down, which means y comes first. So that gives me y minus 1 over b squared, quantity squared, minus, because it's a hyperbola, x minus 2 quantity squared over a squared equals 1. Okay, what do I know? I know from the center to my endpoint is either a or b, and that's my center to one of my vertices, and it doesn't matter which one, is a or b. Since it's up and down, that's the y value, so that's b. B is 3. B squared is 9, so I am going to put 9 underneath the y. And I know it goes there because it's going up and down. Okay, C is the center to the star. It doesn't matter which star you pick, the top or the bottom. That length, if you count, is, let's see, 6. 1, 2, 3, oh, sorry. From the center to the star. Here's the center. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So C is 6. Okay, so that right there is going to give me enough information to find my a squared. I'm going to use c squared equals a squared plus b squared, and I know it's plus because it's the opposite of this sign here. So 6 squared equals a squared plus 3 squared. You can do all that work. Hit pause, square, subtract. You end up with a squared equals the square root of 27. And since it's a squared I'm looking for here, I'm going to leave that as the square root of 27. And that there is your answer for the equation. We need to find the bits and pieces and finish the graph, but that's the first part of your answer. Okay, for a hyperbola, what they'll ask you for on the test is the center, the vertices, the foci, the length of the transverse axis, the length of the conjugate axis, and the equation of the asymptotes. So they would ask you for these pieces on the test. Okay, center, be careful. Now, we figured out the center earlier, but on the test, when they give you something like this and say, hey, what's the center, and then graph it, a lot of kids will put 1, 2. Be careful. X stays with X and Y stays with Y. So it is 2, 1. And if you mess that up, everything else is wrong, including the graph. And you can check it there. It is indeed 2, 1. Okay. Vertices are these endpoints here. And those endpoints are 2, 4, and 2, -2. And when you're doing it on the test, you'll have graph paper, so it'll be a little easier to count. So it's these there. 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, -2. Foci are these two dots there, which are 2, 7 and 2, -5, and they gave those to us as well, 2, 7 and 2, -5. The length of the transverse and the length of the conjugate. Well, I'm going to need to finish graphing to find those, or at least one of those. Okay, I know I go up and down 3, but that's because it's with the y. Right and left are root 27. And I apologize, that should not be root 27, that should be just 27. So, apologies, a squared is 27. And I know those of you that worked on it, and I went so long before I found the mistake, or like, what the heck is she doing? My apologies. A squared is 27. That is 27. A is the square root of 27. Apologies, please fix. That doesn't change any of my answers here. These answers are still correct. That picture is still correct. I'm just going to now finish. Okay, A is approximately, the square root of 27 is 5.2. So you're going to go right and left 5.2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.2. That's from the center. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.2. And from the center, that point that I drew it from was not the center, so I'm going to try it again. There it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.2. And I'm going to make my dot dot rectangular shape. And from there, draw my asymptotes, and my asymptotes help me determine how wide or narrow my hyperbola is going to be. Okay, so I'm going to go from here towards those asymptotes, so it is kind of wide. All right. Okay, so there's the equation, there's a graph, there's these pieces, transverse, conjugate, equation. Okay, transverse has nothing to do with major, minor. It's the length between the two vertices, the length there and there. If I went up 3 and down 3, that total length is 6. Conjugate's the length between my non-vertice points. I went right root 27 and left root 27. That's a total of 2 root 27. And the equation of my asymptotes. Remember, you always use the center and the slope. The center is 2, 1. That's the point you're going to use. And your slope is always plus or minus b over a. B is 3. A is the square root of 27. Okay. And you clean that up. That's 3 over 27 is 3 root 3, which is 1 over root 3. Technically, this here then would be 6 root 3. Only because root 27 is 3 root 3, and double that is 6 root 3. Okay, going on. Y minus 1 equals plus or minus b over a. That's 1 over root 3, parentheses, x minus 2. And that's it. Now, when you check your answers, they did rationalize. I know we don't in class, but if you do, just showing you what you would get. Y minus 1 equals plus or minus root 3 over 3, x minus 2. I don't care how you were to write this on your own. If you left it like this, that would be fine. If you wrote it like this, that would be fine. Either way. All right, there's all the work for 1D. So I did do all of the ones for number 1. I'm going to now move on and do some of the others. Okay, next one I have up is 2B. 2B says for each of the following sketch the graph and identify its characteristics. Okay, x minus 4 quantity squared equals 2 parentheses y minus 1. Now, in Math 3, you may have learned how to graph it from this form. If you did, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to change it to vertex form only because that's the only way I have shown you in this class, so I'm going to be consistent. Now, to change this into vertex form, number of ways. You can distribute the two, or you can divide the two right off. Your choice. I've shown you both ways on previous videos. I'll distribute the two on this one. Oh, and then I'm going to get y by itself by adding the two. And then I'm going to divide everything by 2. And I'm going to put the y on this side. Y equals the quantity of x minus 4 squared, and that's 1/2 x minus 4 squared plus 1. So this is it here in vertex form, which is what I told you earlier to always use for parabolas. Okay, so they want us to sketch. And because it's y squared, I'm sorry, because it's x squared, y equals x squared, it's going to be a traditional up-down parabola. Okay, vertex is opposite of the inside, outside stays the same, everything's as it usually is. Things they're going to ask you for on a parabola: the vertex, the focus, there's only one, the equation, your line of symmetry equation, or axis of symmetry, it may be asked either way, and the equation of your directrix. Okay, so let's go ahead and sketch. All right, it is positive, so we know it's opening up. And to find, oh, LOS we can find right away. That's this here. Up and down line is x equals 1, 2, 3, 4. X equals 4. In order to find either one of these, they're going to ask you for, or not ask you, you need to find your C. 1/4 times the absolute value of A, 1/2. 4 times 1/2 is 2, so your C value is 1/2. So you're going to go up 1/2 and down 1/2. When you go down 1/2 from 1, that puts you at 1/2, so that would be y equals 1/2. When you go up 1/2 from 1, that's 1.5, so that would be 4, 1 and a half. 1.5 or 1.5. All right, so there's your graph, and there are your characteristics. Okay, moving on, I am going to do 2e. And 2e is x squared minus 8 times the quantity of y minus 3 squared equals 8. Okay, sketch and identify its characteristics. All right, there's two squares. And there's a minus sign. I don't care what the coefficients are. If there's a minus sign on one of them, if one of them's negative, it's automatically a hyperbola. Okay, hyperbolas have to equal 1, so I'm going to divide everything by 8. X squared over 8 minus the quantity of y minus 3 squared over 1 equals 1. There it is in standard form. And for a hyperbola, they will ask you for the center, vertices, foci, the length of the transverse axis, the length of the conjugate axis, and the equation of the asymptotes. And we do have to sketch. Okay, center, x stays with x, y stays with y, so it's 0, 3. A is your right and left movement because it's with the x, and A is 2√2 because the square root of 8 is 2√2, which is approximately 2.8, just so graphing purposes. Okay, B is your up and down because that's with the y. The square root of 1 is 1. All right, so let's go ahead and sketch. All right, center is 0, 3, and I'm going to go right and left 2.8, 1, 2.8, 1, 2.8, and up and down 1. Make my rectangular shape, and diagonals. And because x comes first, it's opening right and left. So from these 2 points right here going towards the asymptote, so it's not too wide. Okay, alrighty, vertices are always in the direction of your hyperbola. Since the hyperbola is right and left, these are my vertices, have nothing to do with the major and minor axis. So I went right to root 2 and left to root 2 from the center, and the center was 0, 3. So that would be 2 root 2 comma 3 and negative 2 root 2 comma 3. You could write that as 1 point. It's still 2, but 1 as a plus minus 2 root 2 over 3. It's up to you and how you write that. All right, c squared equals, there's a minus sign here, so it's going to be plus in the formula. C squared equals 8 plus 1. C equals the square root of 9, which is 3. So from the center, I'm going to go right and left 3 and put my stars. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Remember, originally I went right and left 2.8. Now I'm going 3. So it's just a little smidge bit past the vertices. All right, so I went right 3 and left 3 from the center. So that would be plus or minus 3 comma 3. Right 3 up 3, left 3 up 3. If you write that as 2 separate points like I did earlier, that's perfectly fine. Okay, transverse axis is the one between my 2 dots, not my 2 stars, my 2 dots there. And that was 2 root 2, right 2 root 2, left 2 root 2, a total length of 4 root 2. Conjugates here, I went up and down 1, that's a total length of 2. And the equation, y minus, I use my center for my point, so y minus 3 equals plus or minus b over a was 2 root 2, so 1 over 2 root 2, x minus 0, so just the x. You could put minus 0, actually I will just because you do not have to though. So it would be this, y minus 3 equals plus or minus 1 over 2 root 2, parentheses x minus 0. Now, as I stated earlier, we haven't really ever rationalized the denominator, but you can, and they do on the worksheet answers on the back. So it would look like this, y minus 3 equals plus or minus root 2 over 4 if you did rationalize x. That time I'm not going to put the minus 0. You can, it's up to you. Either one, you do not need both. So there's the work for 2E. Okay, moving on to the end. Moving on to 3. I'm going to start off with 3A. 9x squared minus 16y squared plus 54x plus 32y minus 79 equals 0. All right, what they're asking you for here is to convert to standard form. All right, easy enough. Now I'm doing this one because kids struggle with that minus sign. So first off, identify the shape first. There's 2 squares. I know it's not a parabola. Automatically, if there's a minus sign on one of them, it's automatically a hyperbola. So before going any further, it is a hyperbola. All right, so I'm going to rearrange 9x squared plus 54x minus 16y squared plus 32y equals 79. And how do you know whether the x squared comes first or the y squared comes first? Whatever's positive, whatever's negative. Whatever's negative comes second, whatever's positive comes first. Okay, 9, factor out the 9, x squared plus 6x plus blank. Take out a negative 16. That's where a lot of kids oftentimes mess up. You're not taking out a positive, you're taking out a negative. So y squared minus 2y equals 79 plus blank plus blank. Okay, take your numbers, cut them in half and square it. 6 cut in half is 3. Oh, yeah, sorry, looking at the wrong one. 6 cut in half is 3, 3 squared is 9, and you do 9 times 9 is 81. 2 cut in half is 1. 1 squared is 1. Negative 16 times 1 is negative 16. All right. 9 double bubble minus 16 double bubble equals, work all that out, it's 144. All right, x plus 3 times 3 is 9 and adds up to 6. Y minus 1 and 1. 9x plus 3 quantity squared minus 16 y minus 1 quantity squared equals 144. Since it is a hyperbola, we want it to equal 1, so we're going to divide everything by 144. This becomes a big 1 in disguise. And then I reduce. X plus 3 squared. 9 becomes 1. 144 divided by 9 is 16. Minus y minus 1 quantity squared. 16 becomes 1. 144 divided by 16 is 9. And there is my beautiful equation. Thank goodness that's all they're asking for. I don't have to sketch or do anything else. Okay. Make sense? Alrighty. 3D, 3y squared minus x minus 6y plus 10 equals 0. Okay. What's the shape? First thing, and I've said this in previous notes and homework questions, if there's only one squared, it's automatically a parabola. So before going any further, acknowledge it is a parabola. All right, now I'm going over this one because when we get things in standard form, in this case vertex form because it's a parabola, when I start to complete the square, a lot of kids mess the parabola up because they're so used to doing hyperbolas and ellipses and circles when there's you're completing the square twice. They're so used to doing those because there's 3 different shapes where you do that. The parabola, we don't do it as often anymore and they forget. So here's what you do. We do not do it the same way we do up here. I get only the squares to one side. The squared is the y squared. So I'm going to group the 3y squared with the y. And I'm going to move the x and the 10 over to the other side. Add the x, subtract the 10. Why? Because I want to complete the squared on the 3y squared, not the x, because the x has no squared. It's just going to sit over on the other side while I complete the square here. So I'm only completing the square once. Excuse me, I'm only completing the square once here, not on the x. Okay, take out your 3, y squared minus 2y plus blank equals x minus 10 plus blank. Cut the negative 2 in half and square it. You get 1. 3 times 1 is 3. 3y minus 1 squared equals x minus 7. Move your 7 over. X equals, I'm going to put x on the other side, 3 parentheses y minus 1 squared plus 7. X equals 3 times the quantity of y minus 1 squared plus 7. This is how you will write it on the test. The worksheet answers does write it in the book standard form, and that they add the 7 over and divide the 3, and it looks like this. Y minus 1 squared equals at the 7, x plus 7, and divide the 3. You do not have to write it that way. I'm just explaining it to you. So when you look at the worksheet answers, you're like, oh, why does it look different? This is the way I want you to write it. They are the same thing. This is the way you would plug it into a graphing calculator. But again, they are the same thing. All right, lastly, I'm going to do is 3e. At least set it up. 2x squared plus 4x minus 5y plus 17 equals 0. Okay, so again, if there's only one squared, it's automatically a parabola. You don't have to do anything else to know what the shape is, and you will have some that easy on the test where it says name the conic. What shape is this conic? It's a parabola because there's only one squared. Okay. Again, because it's a parabola, a lot of kids struggle. I'm going to complete the square in only one variable, and it happens to be the x's because that's the one that's squared. So I'm going to get the x's to one side and everything else to the other. So I'm going to add the 5y, subtract the 17, and this is what I end up with. And the 2x squared plus 4x on this side because I am only completing the square once. Okay, so I'll start you off. Plus 2x plus blank equals 5y minus 17 plus blank. Cut in half and square it, multiply, and continue. Okay, so when you continue, you're going to do this, equals 5y minus 15. And you're going to factor here, and then you're going to add the 15 and divide the 5. You're going to add the 15 and divide the 5. So your final answer will look something like this. Y equals 2/5 quantity squared plus a number. And you have to figure the rest of it out. Again, the worksheet will write it different. I want you to write it like this. All right? That is it for this session of homework questions.